Welcome back to this Mr. YouTube channel, guys. Today we are back on the Mark II, and today we're going to be getting in the lightweight rear beam that I made. You should have seen some videos on making that. I'm not going to show much of this underneath of the car. It's been sitting outside for a while, so this rear beam is just cooked with rust, and so we're getting all this out. We're deleting this proportioning valve. We're adding in a different one. And on top of that, the gas tank, we're swapping to a Mark III gas tank simply because I have one. A lot of people just put like fuel cells up front, stuff like that. That's not something I'm looking to do right now. I like the idea of having fuel tank back here with stock filler neck and all that, nice and easy. That's what we're gonna be doing today, getting this gas tank out and getting the rear beam out. I'll just show you guys when it's all done. What you guys haven't seen is I just did a lot more cutting. So basically everything that would have been like an exhaust hanger, brake caliper hangers or brake line hangers, that kind of stuff, it's all been cut out. And that was all about 10 extra pounds. I also cut out the e-brake handle and the tubes for it. After that, I just kind of went through and anything that was like slightly rusty, I rust treated, and then I just did a like Cosmoline undercoating. So this isn't like the stuff that you get from Advanced Auto or anything like that. This is actual Cosmoline stuff that's like the factory would have used. You know, like why Mark IV smell like crayons. That's this kind of stuff. I'll put a link in the description for that. I finished pulling all the brake lines out. Because we're not going to be using standard brake lines anymore. We're going to go to AN fittings, but that's in another video. Now we're back to the Mark III gas tank. I pumped out all the old gas. I cleaned it out. I'm planning just to use this just for simplicity. A lot of people put fuel tanks up front now, but that's not where I am yet. So I'll put the stock tank in. Should be nice and easy on a Mark II. Mark III tank literally bolts right in, so you just throw it up. One little note, you have to have a grounding screw, and mine broke off, so now you can see I rib nutted it. Something that happened, so keep that in mind. You have to have that. You'll see right here on the tank, there's a grounding strap that goes from here down to here. This is where you put a bolt through. And then after that, we'll be putting the beam in, and I'll show you what I got. There's some things called grate plates, but we're gonna do something a little different and DIY like usual. So let's put that in now. Got the tank installed, and the Mark II straps are actually the same. And one thing that I lost was this rear, it's like a combination thing. It's got two dowels, and they go into each one of these straps, and then you bolt it through the middle. So I lost that. Had to get it from those straps, and it's rusty, so I'll try to find another one, but for now, it's okay. Yeah, everything's nice and flush. The lines come out here. My feed line got messed up, so I have some Vibrant line on it. And I think I'm gonna like stop in this area, and I'm gonna put a fuel filter here because I am gonna be running E85, so it'll be nice to have a good pre-filter right here, which I have one up here, but I'm just not gonna change it, or I'm not going to add it in for a while. It's not a big deal. I don't need the fuel lines ran right now. And another thing is the evap line. So you need this open, otherwise your tank will expand and want to blow up. I don't know if I'm going to run it the whole length of the car and just run out the fender liner. That's usually the most common way to do it. We'll figure out where we're going to put that later. So for now, we're going to go to putting in the rear beam. I made these plates, the plate holes. So when you drop these cars, like lower them, the center of the wheel arch goes forward because you're lowering the car so much that now it wants to go that way. So these plates, this is like a real cheap way of it's gonna space the rear beam outwards. So instead of the wheel, when it's lowered, being like right here, it'll push it back kind of to normal. What I really need, and what you would need in drag racing, is you want to extend your wheelbase. So imagine the center of your wheels right here. Well, if you lower it on a stock rear beam, your wheel's going to be up here, so you have effectively shortened your wheelbase, which means you don't have enough leverage when you're launching the car to keep power on the front wheels. So if I can center it, then I'll have that much more leverage from here. What people have done is you buy the grate plates, which are like, they're like 5/8 thick, and that actually pushes your wheel out even more. Or you go the expensive route and you buy an adjustable beam, which would put like a turnbuckle style right here, and you just crank it out and it would push your beam back, and then that way the center of your wheel would be like back here. But one of the effects of that is if you put your wheel too far back, especially if you have a stock wheel, you'll start running into the gas tank. So I'm hoping here I'll be okay. If a stock wheel wants to hit, I'll put a big goofy spacer on it, because I'll just need it just to roll around and just cruise. So it's not a big deal how it looks if it looks goofy. But with skinnies on back here, I think I could probably put a grate plate on and bring it way back here, because then again, if your all your axis is right here, if you move it further back, that's just adding the spring tension to go forward to hold your front wheels down. That's what you're doing back here. If your wheels all the way over here, you're not gonna have enough leverage to keep those front wheels down. If it's in the center, it's about stock, and if it's further back, you've extended your wheelbase and you have way more tension on the front wheels. We're just gonna get the beam loaded onto the cart, and when you do use these plates, obviously it's thicker, so you just get longer bolts, and I think they're like 35mm or something like that. So these are just stock, I think they're stock B6 Passat front cross member bolts. So when you take the whole front end off of a B6 Passat, these are 16s and these will hold in the front, I'm pretty sure. Or they could be shock bolts, I forget. I just had a bunch laying around, so that's what I'm gonna use. And another added benefit is these are Noid lock washers built in. So what they do is they kind of lock in and don't back out. But I am, to be safe, pretty much every bolt on this car I'm gonna put Loctite on. It'll just be blue Loctite, but this car is gonna rattle like crazy, so I'm just gonna Loctite everything for safe measures. I'm gonna get all the brakes and stuff like that. All that's gonna be done in this video, but it's not gonna be like a DIY showing you how to do like rear discs or anything like that. It's just, I wanna get this thing on the ground and see how the height is. And I also have some drag race specific rear springs that we're gonna put on just cheap coilovers, just because just keeping everything cost effective. So right now you can see the plates in place, everything's bolted in, but I need to drop this out because I do have some bushings, those Prothane inserts. We'll get that out, drop it down, and whack the bushings in, and then put it back up, and then we'll get to the other stuff. So it's a while later now. Things aren't going as planned. When I was whacking in those inserts, they actually blew these bushings out. And I don't know if you have ever done Mark III ones, but they're horrible to get out. Here's what it usually looks like, and you just take a drill bit and you just drill around all the way around to try to knock out the insert. And then you take a saw blade and you cut down the inside of it, and then you hit it with like an air hammer or a chisel, and then it'll pop out. But it's a nightmare to do. So at this point, I'm going to order those ProFlex ones, because those ones are terrible to put back in. So I might as well just buy the poly ones. If they last, they last. What we're gonna do is just throw it back in the car with just the bolts just holding in the front, just to have it off the ground. And then we'll also mount up the shocks. That way when the new bushings come in, I can have it hang by the shocks and just let it drop down, and then throw the new bushings in. So that's what we're gonna do now. And then I guess this video will just pick up in a week whenever the bushings show up. I plan to just take some cheap race lands, which my buddy Austin gave to me. I freed them up, got them spinning. Now they're placeholders. I need stiffer springs in the back, so that's where these come in. These are some hyper coils, and you measure them by the inside diameter and how tall they are. And then like if you want these same exact springs, if you want to change the spring rate, you can just change that to an 800, or you can change it to a 1000, you can change it to a 700, 650. It's pretty easy to do that. To keep everything nice and solid, I got the Prothane kit. That's the part number. These are the rear shock mounts. This doesn't have anything with it. So here's the KYB part number. So you have to buy a stock mount kit, because this actually comes with all the hardware necessary in order to mount these. So with all this stuff there, I'm going to take the springs off, make sure this one fits right, and this is going to go at the top, whereas I had the helper spring. I used to have the helper spring up here because you would want your center of gravity down here when you're turning, but for my needs, I need this spring. I need the spring all the way at the top. When the car compresses down, least amount of travel, the center of the spring would be right here, but if you move the spring up, center of the spring will be about right here. So that'll help transfer the weight up to the front wheels. So that's the whole point of this, is when this thing launches, you don't want it to really move. You want it to stay as flat as possible and just go. I'll show you guys when I'm done. It's gonna be a mess, so I gotta grease it all up and stuff like that. I'll show you guys an issue that I'm sure a ton of people have had. You need 2 of these jam nuts, and of course one was missing. Now these are called jam nuts. I usually get all my stuff from Bell Metric because they're really easy to use. Here's the part number. It is an M10 by 1 thread pitch jam nut, and they look like that. So if you're in a pinch, that's what you need. And then another thing is, everyone messes these strut mount installs up. So here's what you need. When the springs are on, you need a collar. There's a collar that goes on the shaft, and you can see it right in here. Usually it looks more like a washer, but on these coilovers it looks like that. And what that does is it keeps the strut from coming up through the center portion, or the lock right here, the collar. So it keeps that from popping out. So you need that first. Then after that, it's the long shaft. It's like just a sleeve, long sleeve, and this lower bushing and a nut. That's it. Now it goes in the car. And when it goes in the car, that's when you use the rest of this stuff. 3 nuts total. Usually those kits come with them. I'm only gonna do one side at a time just because it's hard and I'm doing it myself. I mean, I have my helper. I'm just gonna lower the car down, and then remember, I'm still waiting on these bushings, so yeah, it's just on a bolt. One thing that might trip you guys up is the Prothane mounts are kind of made weird. So it seems like this big washer would go underneath, but it doesn't. It's just how it is. This big washer has to go up top because that's the only way you can get a socket on here. If you put the small washer up here and the big one down bottom, you won't be able to tighten your nut. You'll be wondering what's going on. So the big one has to go up top, and then after that, get this guy, throw him on, another jam nut. And then the final piece is, if you have your OEM strut caps, you just pop them on. So that's all good. Now we'll get to throwing the brakes on. We're now on to putting on the brake stuff. There's a couple things to note, is that I do have e-brake cables up there, but I have cut the e-brake out of my car. If you need them, I'll have them in the description below. I don't need those. And the same with brake hoses. I don't need the brake hoses because everything we're doing is going to be custom.
We got the blaster.
I see. This car was a GLI, so it came with factory rear discs. But being old, you can see there's no hole for an ABS sensor like a Mark III one has. So right here, there's a hole for the ABS sensor. There's not one on these. So these are still good parts. I can still use them on another thing. Maybe I'll use them on the Mark I. In this situation, I want an ABS sensor, and I also have an OEM ABS ring. I have the part number for that right here. I have 2 of these because I'm gonna save one. I'm gonna save one probably for the Rabbit. Basically, it'll be set up to where, like, if this wheel sees 0, then we can do launch control or something like that. Or if this wheel speed is 0 and the front wheels are spinning like crazy, then it can kind of add traction control because it knows the rear's not going, if that makes sense. These are just normal Mark III 2-liter GTI rear discs. These are all in one, so this is a hub and a rotor all in one. They suck to work on because you have to buy a new hub and bearing kit. So you gotta whack in the races front and back, fill it up with grease, grease the bearing and stuff like that, set preload. So it's just annoying. But so back here, this is actually where this little guy goes. So you can just, I'll have to hammer them on. These are left and right specific, and you can tell which side faces up because the ABS sensor always faces up. Techstar brakes, they're decent. Remember, it's not a big deal about braking on these. I'm not going that fast yet, and these will stop me. They only got to stop you once. Now we're just gonna get to packing the bearings and throwing on the hubs. I'm reusing all the stock Mark II bolts. See how there's a notch right here in the beam? That's for the ABS sensor. So you kind of line that up. Right bolt holes. Now we gotta put the bearings in. So come over here. Easiest way is to just find a socket that fits pretty snug. And remember, the taper side has to go out. Pretty much you just whack it in there until the noise changes. They have these little channels in here so you can hit it out if you are ever changing them or swapping them, because you can swap them over to like another rotor if that's what you're doing. And the same thing on this one, taper side out, flat side in. This bush bearing goes in as you're putting it on, but back here, this bearing has to be installed, has to be already packed, and I always take a bunch of grease and I pack inside in the walls, and then you also have to put the seal on. I don't have the little bearing packer by like grabbing a bunch of grease kind of where the ridges are, just kind of try to get it in. It's a terrible messy job and it sucks, so I'll just do this for a while and then get back to you. Try your best to clean out around here because that's where you got to put the seal. And you just grab the seal. This is ready to just throw on the hub, and then I can pack the other side of the bearing. Once we pack the other side of the bearing, then we can start tightening everything up. Remember, you gotta have the washer and you gotta have the nut, so you always save that because they're all the same on any of the rear beam setups. They're all the same, so just use that stuff over again. Common issue, everything's new, everything's aftermarket, so nothing has really the right tolerance. So I got it on as far as I could, and then it wouldn't go on anymore, so I just shouldn't do it, but oh well, I'm not getting new stuff. I just took a 24, put it on the bearing race, and hammered it in, and then now I have enough to where I can put my washer on, and I can put the nut on, and then I can basically tighten it on the rest of the way, just pull it in place. When this happens, it's usually like you won't be able to get the thing apart, and when you do get it apart, you're gonna have to like cut the old bearing off. Like, it's gonna be a nightmare. For now, it's on, and it should work. After you set this free play, just leave it as it is. Still put the cotter pin in, but after you drive on it or whatever, you should always recheck it. Violet. I usually go until you can't spin it anymore, like you lock it up. All right, now it's deadlocked, and then back it off. So in the book, it says some crazy stuff like put a screwdriver in it, and if you can move the washer easy by hand, which you can see it moves, and it's got drag on it, so, and it's all brand new, so this will break in. So I'm gonna leave this as it is for now. Take this guy, there's a hole that goes through, and then you just line these up, and then you can put the cotter pin through it, and then you're all done. Try not to dent it up too bad, because if you do, it'll actually rub on the hub, but if it does, it'll just self-clearance. So that one's good to go. We'll repeat the step on the other side, and then we'll get to putting on the brakes. Now we're here to put on the brake carriers. These are specific to Mark IIIs and Mark IIs. Just be aware of that. If you get a Mark IV one, it won't work. You'd have to do some sort of crazy spacing or something like that. Our 8mm Allens, and these are just notorious to strip. So just do everything you can, grease everything, add anti-seize, all that stuff, so these will last you for the next time you got to do rotors. Now we're on to the calipers. In typical fashion, I went to the junkyard and I grabbed these Mark 4 calipers. These are a direct bolt-on swap to Mark 3s. All you have to do is change the line. These come with like a banjo style, whereas the Mark 3 lines, they kind of screw in with a female flare. Don't buy the ECS lines because that's just a waste of money. If you are using all factory brake lines, your best bet is to just buy B5 Passat rear brake hoses. You have a banjo there and the female there. This is the exact same length as the OEM Mark III hose, so this would just bolt in place, easy. Don't spend crazy money for custom lines. You can buy those about $7 a piece, or you can get them from the junkyard. If you do go to the junkyard to get these, the biggest concerns with these are e-brakes being stuck and the bleed nipples being seized. So when you go, take an 11, crack it. If it comes out free, you're good. And also take your brake retractor tool and compress them, because these got to be twisted in. And if they twist in and you can get the bleeder out, they're good. If you can't do any of that, go to another car. Any Mark IV GTI, Jetta, New Beetle, anything. Like, they're everywhere. So $20 at the junkyard versus like 100 and something new plus a core. Can't beat it. Throw these on, and then I'll show you guys my plans. It's not going to be in this video of how I'm running brake lines. Basically, I'm just putting a AN fitting in there. Always make sure you lube up your pins, that way they move free and push out. Brakes, make sure they're all the way in. And this is one thing, it's dumb, but a lot of people mess it up. These springs cannot be inside of here. Like, I'll always see it where these springs get jammed up. It's the whole point of these springs is to keep tension on the carriers. So you make sure both of these springs are underneath here. That's why there's a little notch here and here. That's where the springs ride. I'm adding AN lines. So originally this stuff is a banjo. You tighten this down, tighten it into there, and then it's now converted to an AN4, which it'll be in another video. So yeah, but the rear end's totally done now. I'll show you guys another time when we do these Bluetooth bushings, but that's later down the road. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next one.